Episode 9 of Titans is called Hank and Don. It deals with the origin stories of Hawk and Dove, who the last time we saw them, were sitting in a hospital. Well, okay, one was sitting in a hospital. The other one was laying up in the hospital unconscious or in a coma or whatever, and that was all the way back in episode 2. Coming off of last week's thrilling cliffhanger, the one in which Starfire grabbed Raven by the throat and basically threatened to Tamaran her ass, we take a pretty big detour this week and we get an episode that's very character study based and it's focused on Hawk and Dove, who, again, we haven't seen in a while. In fact, the last time we saw Dawn, she wasn't doing that good. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you guys. I came into this episode preparing to hate it because, as I mentioned at the end of my review last week, I was like, why do we need this episode? Like, why are we having it now? It feels like it stunts the momentum of the whole season. The season is slow enough as it is. Why do we need an episode about Hawk and Dove? I definitely would have preferred an episode like this to happen earlier in the season, and so I came into this episode with negative preconceived notions about how it was gonna play out. God damn it, Titans did it again. They got me. They know how to get me. This show knows how to hit me where it hurts. Go into the show thinking, okay, this is going to be a time waster or a filler episode, an episode that easily could have been earlier in the season. Instead, I walk away going, damn, I actually care more about Hawk and Dove than even I did before, and I want to see more of them. I mean, yeah, sure, you could still argue it stunts the momentum of the season a little bit. And towards the end of the episode, which we will get to in a second, they actually do tie it in a little bit to the main story. They introduce an interesting key plot point that actually could become relevant in episodes 10 and 11. So I'm forced to look this episode in the eye as a man and just go, all right. You got me. I can't even bitch at you. Dawn and Hawk are in the hospital. Dawn obviously is still fucked up from her encounter with the nuclear family. Hank is doing what any responsible boyfriend / superhero partner would be doing in this scenario. Drinking, he's sleeping, and he's breaking into the medicine cabinet to steal more meds. I guess in between popping pills and drinking, he's taking naps. And when he takes naps, we get to go inside his head and look into his past, because I guess he's dreaming about the past. Although with the way that Raven pops up in this episode, like constantly as far as in the flashbacks, and she shows up in the dreams and she's like trying to scream out to Dawn and Hank, it makes me wonder if Raven somehow induced these dreams so that she could reach them easier. I don't know, it's just a weird theory that I had off the top of my head. We'll get to Raven in a second. Let's start with Hank, because again, this episode did such a great job at fleshing out Hank as well as fleshing out his brother Donnie. Yeah, like I said last week, if you have read the comics, then you know that Hawk and Dove were not always a man and a woman. Actually, in the beginning, Hawk and Dove were brothers. This episode definitely takes its time to flesh out both Hank and his brother, flesh out their relationship, and actually delve deeper into the tragedy behind Hank's character and the tragedy behind Dawn's character, because she gets her own backdoor origin too. This episode actually was kind of heavy emotionally. It definitely goes there. It's a little bit heavier than your typical superhero show. It definitely tries to delve deep into the tragedy that is behind these characters. One of the things I feel like this season has done a pretty good job of is it does a great job at emphasizing that trauma can affect you, not just physically, but psychologically and emotionally. Physically, we see the toll that all the pain and all the stab wounds and the gunshot wounds and all that shit have taken on Hank over the years. He's now addicted to alcohol. He's now addicted to pills. See how Dick Grayson, all the shit that he went through with Bruce, all the shit that he went through with his parents, how that has affected him as a person. And now he's like uber violent Robin and he needs to like find a different path. In this episode, they delve deeper into Hank. We get to get insight into him as a kid, because apparently as a kid, he was a star football player. And instead of being rewarded like a normal coach would reward a great player, his coach tries to reward him by, molesting him. Yeah, his coach in this episode, a complete and total scumbag, a creep, a bastard, an evil, disgusting human being. I hate people like this. Obviously, everybody should hate this type of shit, but this shit is also real, because this type of shit, like child abuse and sexual molestation, it exists in today's world. All you have to do is take a look at Penn State and scandals like that to know that this shit happens in sports and academics all the time. It's a sad thing, because you definitely see that Hank was actually trying to take the hit for his brother. The coach showed an interest in his brother. Hank was like, no, you don't get to have my brother. I will go into the weight room with you. I will take the hit for both of us. And we see how that affects Hank and his brother as they grow older. We see that Hank is once again a star football player in college years later. I think in 2009, I think is the year. But we see he also takes a lot of heavy hits, dishes out as much as he takes, and eventually it catches up to him. His brother gets concerned about him. They have to go see a doctor. You find out that, because he's playing football, he has taken a lot of hits to the head. I have played football. I know exactly what this looks and feels like. And the fact that this show took its time out to flesh these characters out by touching on real world issues and problems like child abuse and the physical blunt force trauma of CTE or concussion syndrome, it really does give you a personal sense of who these characters are, and it really does make you feel attached to them. You can't help but root for these people. Unfortunately, Donnie is looking out for his brother a little bit too much. He goes to, I think, the dean of the school or whatever, and he's basically like, yeah, he needs help. We should probably have him not play football or something anymore. Hank confronts his brother about it in the library. Unfortunately, they're a little bit too loud. Somebody has a problem with it. They step to Hank. Hank has a problem with them, he punches them, and then all of a sudden it turns into a brawl in the library. I guess he didn't go necessarily to the dean, he went to like the athletic director or something, and he was able to get Hank removed from the team temporarily or something until he gets his health right. I'm not sure, the details get kind of fuzzy because Minka Kelly does get naked in this episode, and that's not nothing. Bottom line is they both get expelled for fighting, and that's when his brother Donnie, the guy who usually stops Hank from getting into trouble, he tries to start trouble on his own. Like, look man, after everything that happened to us as kids and all that terrible shit you went through with that coach, I feel like you use football as an outlet to release your anger and pain. We need to find a different outlet for you. And that's essentially when Hawk and Dove are born. They get these makeshift football uniforms. One is a hawk, one is a dove. Essentially, you're like, we're going to take out our anger on pedophiles and criminals like that, people who think they can get away with doing this type of shit to people. We get some pretty cool video footage of them on their first takedown of some pedophile who I guess got a slap on the wrist or something. It's actually pretty cool to see. And to be honest, I like the dynamic between Hank and his brother Donnie. I actually wish we could have gotten more of Donnie in this episode. Meanwhile, they transition into Don, and you don't get as much with Don as you get with Hank and his brother, but that's okay because they give you enough to still feel like you're attached to her. Don is with her mother. She apparently has been in an abusive household. Her father beat her mother and her sister, and apparently she and her sister are out, but her mother won't leave her father. Bottom line is they all converge on the street, and there's a terrible accident, and Don's mother and Hank's brother Donnie are both killed in the accident. If there is one thing I can address in terms of criticism for the show, I do think that the CGI and the special effects shots, they leave a little bit to be desired sometimes. Sometimes it's gorgeous. Sometimes it looks really good. Like Beast Boy, whenever he transforms into his tiger, I feel like, oh yeah, that shit is awesome. But specifically as it relates to the wide shots and how that affects the way things look in a scene, the way that it's framed, specifically wide shots that have to do with characters doing something superhuman or maybe something happening really fast. I'm sorry, the CGI just isn't really that convincing, and that's what happened on this accident scene. It happened so fast. It was edited so poorly, I barely even saw what happened. Car flipped off the road. They transitioned to a wide shot above the car, and you could see it like land on the curb, and I'm assuming it took out Don's mother and it took out Hank's brother. Still, we're 9 episodes into the shit, and I still sit back sometimes and go, wow, that did not look convincing. That's the best you got? This tragedy and this trauma also is important to the core of these characters because Hank and Don are drawn together because of it. They start getting closer, they start hanging out, they start talking about their issues. Eventually, Hank does open up to her and reveal that when he was a kid, he was taken advantage of by this coach. And Don, which is surprisingly not necessarily in her character, at least not the character in the comics and not the character she appeared to be in episode 2 of this season, he's the one that goes looking for trouble, kind of like Donnie. She goes off, she looks for this pedophile, she gets into a fight with him in their house. Not that seasoned badass that we saw back in episode 2, but that's okay because Hank shows up and he starts beating the ever-living shit out of this pedophile. He even offers for Don to leave. He's like, look, you need to just go, just get out of here. And she's like, no, if you're gonna beat him to death, that's okay. I'll stay here and I'll watch because it just looks like it would be a lot of fun. And they close the door and you assume that's what happens. And then afterward, we get the most glorious moment of any Titans episode ever to be so far. We get Minka Kelly in full nude. That's right. This show, I said it before on Facebook or something like that. I'm like, this show will forever be among the GOATs, if for nothing else, just for this. Because we get to see Minka Kelly's fine ass in all of its glory. Granted, the lighting is a little bit low and you have to squint to see what you want to see, but I'm just saying, it's there. And it makes total sense why these two would bang right after an experience like that. It's like, look, doesn't beating the ever-living shit out of a pedophile and giving them what you deserve, doesn't it, I don't know, get you a little bit horny, get you a little bit in the mood? Somehow, though, the next morning, she's kind of like pushing him away. She's doing the whole, one-night stand and then we have to stop it thing. She's like, no, we can't be together. That's when Raven pops back up. Raven has popped up in mirrors and reflections throughout the entire episode, trying to get Hank's attention, trying to get Don's attention in this scene. She actually does get her attention. And then finally, we transition to modern day where Hank is still asleep in the hospital. And Dawn wakes up. She wakes up and she falls into his arms and she's like, hey, we need to connect to the main story again. We need to go find Jason Todd. Rachel is in trouble. We need to go find Jason Todd? What the hell does that mean? What is that? I don't know. I'm curious about that, but I'm also feeling kind of awesome about it because we get to see Jason Todd again. You look for the promo for next week's episode. Oh my god, it looks like we're going to get a brief throwdown between Donna Troy and Starfire, and it's going to be glorious. We even saw the lasso of persuasion. Again, for anybody that doesn't read comics, Donna Troy doesn't necessarily have a lasso of truth. She has a lasso of persuasion, which works a little bit differently than the lasso of truth, but still, it's big lasso dick energy, so we should be happy about it. Things look like they're definitely picking up from here. So guys, tell me, what did you think about episode 9, Hank and Dawn? Put your comments in the comment section below. Like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.